Thank you very much, Helen, for asking me, particularly for using your school to disseminate. It's funny, when people introduce you, you can't recognise yourself, can you, when you hear them describe you? I'll just give you my background because I was saying this morning, one of the great benefits of being so old is that you have time to do a lot of things. And I've only been psychologist for the second half of my life. I started as a primary school teacher, actually working, my first job was 3 years in early years. So gradually sort of moved on. And I had a movement degree, interested in children's motor control, motor development. So naturally, being in the classroom, teaching movement, teaching PE, very interested in children whose motor coordination was poor. And in those days, I'm talking about the early 70s, we didn't understand about motor coordination. We didn't understand very much about developmental disorders at all. But we did, I was in a position where we were teaching in North London. If you had a poorly coordinated child, you knew jolly well you're going to wait 3 or 4 years before you got an OT referral and had any kind of targeted input for these children. So as a teacher you think, well, what is there we can do that actually helps those children while they're in the classroom? So this is the background to how we started this. And then we had this, rather in the way Helen is, we had this wonderful experience of children benefiting, but not understanding why. We didn't know what the mechanisms were or what it did. And then I had the privilege to work with a very inspirational clinical psychologist at Great Ormond Street. And then I became a psychologist myself. And since then I've been able to do some research actually on why these different materials and this particular approach, because it's more than just having the materials, it's how we use them. I mean, it's just a piece of foam with a few holes in it. Nothing rocket science about that. It's how you use it and the materials we have here that support how you use it with the children that actually makes the difference. So what my role now is, if you allow me to, is to show you not only what it does, but how that works. Because obviously you need to know something about the mechanisms if you're going to feel confident in using it. So we're going to look at why it works, and how, what are the key elements in delivering the programme that make the difference. So the background is this notion, which is recognised in psychology, of embodied cognition. And what that means is that you learn to think, you build your cognitive understanding through your physical engagement with the environment. So actually, you probably know this. If you go and visit a place, you have a completely different understanding of it than if you've watched a video on a travelogue or you've seen it through another means. Actually experiencing it has a much greater impact on the brain. And this is very obvious, those of you who have or work with infants. Everything a little infant does is to do with the physical engagement. What we were a bit slow to recognise is this continues on through childhood. And recent research has shown that it's actually true of adolescents and adults. When we are physically engaged, we have a better understanding and a better retention. And of course there's an added element to this now, because with all the technology advancements, children have less exposure to physical play. Now I look out here and you've got a field and you've got wonderful play activities. I come from North London where it's very urban. The families are much more dependent on IT and having tablets. When my children were growing up, they weren't out of the house by 10 o'clock, they were climbing up the walls. But, my grandchildren have a much calmer home life because they've got iPads and tablets, but they're missing out on something, or they could miss out on really important physical play experience. So it's really recognising that we have, in order to foster physical connections, because they're not part of family life anymore. And if we talk about what these mechanisms are, I want you to sort of think as teachers on a different level. Because we've obviously in the classroom we focus on the skills which we know we have to nurture and help children master through the primary school. But yes, these help those, but they're actually working at a level below. So I want you to transcend below that level, skill level of reading, writing, numeracy, and the other skills which children require. And think, what's happening in the brain to enable that child to master those skills. So, what the physical connection with the pegs does, very simply, an early one is that you use both hands to manipulate the pegs. So if you're working with a pegboard, we'll have the pot on one side of the board. I'll show you, hold and show you at the same time. But basically, if the child appears to be right-hand dominant, you have the pegboard box on the left-hand side, the non-dominant side. Pick up with the non-dominant, transfer to the dominant, and it's the dominant hand that puts in. So if it's a left-handed child, the opposite is true. Pegs on the right. And put in. So the first thing that happens, this is what we call bilateral integration. The two sides of the body are working together. Now, the brain, as you probably know, is divided into two hemispheres with a bridge across the middle. And in most people, most of the language function is in the left hemisphere, and most of the spatial functions in the right. Now, something which uses both halves of the body in an integrated way is sending messages across from the two halves of the brain. So that is crucial, especially if it's language and spatial, which handwriting is, for example. Using the pegs encourages good posture for working, it develops fine motor skills, and at a very basic level, the pegs cleverly designed, not for my adult hand, but for a child's hand, so that when you grasp the peg, the head of the peg sits in the palm of the hand, and the fingers, which hold the writing implement, hold the neck of the peg like this. So you have one or two fingers opposed to the thumb. And as the peg goes into the board has a lot of resistance, so that when you push it in, all the muscles in the hand and the upper arm are working hard.
1, 2,
Boy! Faster!
3, 4,
Faster!
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Oh, very good indeed!
Is that how we press it? Shall we put it back and do it again? Show me how you do it. Which hand do you use? Good boy.
And then this one now.
Good boy. It goes all the way to the right side, doesn't it?
So just by using the pegs, picking it up, swapping hands, putting it in, already think of all the brain activity, think of all the workout. Your brain's getting a workout as if you're in the gym, preparing for any activity which requires those kind of skills. So that's very, very basic. So basic that, you know, if you look at a lot of young adult writers now who are taught to hold a writing implement, very often they have what we call a lateral thumb. The thumb crosses like this. Now look at my hand. Look at my hand when I use the correct grip. I've got what we call a thumb web space. I can rotate movement in that position. Once my hand has a lateral thumb, look what I have a clenched fist. There's no movement, but I can only move from the wrist or the elbow or the shoulder. Yes? Now the minute we engage large groups of large muscles, we use up more energy, we fatigue earlier, we can't sustain writing over time. So, you know, being able to develop a good, strong writing implement, writing grip, will actually contribute to that. So these are the sort of things, these are all the hidden benefits of working with the pegs. But I'm just giving you one or two as an example. It works very much on non-verbal skills, the spatial, directional, and perceptual skills that are essential for literacy and numeracy. All those rules, we work from left to right, we work top to bottom. If we're doing tens and units, we actually work from right to left and so on. All these different rules and spatial conventions need to be nurtured. It encourages the use of language for directing activity, really, really important, and it strengthens memory. And as I said, it has impact across the curriculum, not just in literacy, but in all aspects.
In September of last year, we came across the Pegs to Paper programme. I was introduced to it by Simon, who is just down the road. He was quite keen to promote it within the school, and we were looking for something because we had a gap with our writing and wanted to improve handwriting. So it seemed a natural progression. We started with a project in September with just a small group of children, and then very rapidly moved on, seeing the success of it, moved on to bigger groups, to eventually the whole class using it, and interventions then were rolled out across the school. So we've got small intervention groups in years 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, and the impact of it has been felt right across the school.